Let's have a look at the default files of the Golden Harvest v3 to get an understanding of how the configuration and effect customization works. First, there's an effect fonts folder that contains all effect presets both for InHilt and for NeoPixel. There's a huge library of effect presets contained in this folder from which you can select your favorite one. Let's have a closer look at it. The structure inside is as follows. Each effect library is called an effect font slot and has its own slot folder. For InHilt, there's slot 3 and slot 4, for example, which are effect libraries for RGB LEDs using colored clash or white clash, respectively. Keep in mind that these are just preset effect libraries. Users can still fully customize them. The firmware ignores all characters after the digit so that one can even add one's own description to each effect font slot. For NeoPixel, there are 3 different effect libraries that differ with respect to the amount of effects that they contain. There's a basic, default, and extended effect library. Let's have a look at the default effect library first to explain how the effect engine works. There are 8 different blade profiles, whose number can be arbitrarily extended, of course. In the default package, there are variations of the classic effect, blade 1 to blade 6, as well as a color flow effect, blade 7, also known as rainbow, and a flame blade effect in blade profile 8. Let's open the first blade profile as an example. Now, this is where the actual magic happens. Our effect engine knows 2 types of effects, background effects and on-top effects. These 2 types of effects can be arbitrarily combined with each other on the fly to generate amazing effect combinations which give the user a large customization option without having to set up any effects on their own. Imagine you have a rainbow effect as a background effect, for example. If you combine it with an unstable on-top effect, you will get an unstable rainbow blade. Let's consider this example in a short video here.
Choose blade effects.
Each blade profile contains a single background effect that is defined in the background.txt file here. However, there can be arbitrarily many on-top effects in each blade profile, which you can change on the fly by cycling through them in the effect menu. So these are represented by on top 1 to on top 14 in this case here. But what if you have a certain blade profile, like a flame blade for example, but you want to change only the color of this particular effect? Well, each blade profile can store arbitrarily many color profiles too. That means without needing to change the blade profile, you can cycle through different color profiles of this particular blade profile on the fly. That means you can not only change the combination of background effects and on-top effects on the fly, but if you have chosen a specific combination, you can cycle through many different color variations as well. Of course, the combination and color that you selected on the fly is saved and paired with the currently active sound font. You can also pair effects and colors with the different sound fonts manually on the SD card. Let's go back to the overview of the blade profiles of the default effect library. There's another folder that we did not yet talk about. It's the accent folder. It contains so-called accent profiles, which describe the light effects displayed by the accent LEDs. There's also a sequencer available. You can define accent profiles both for the state in which the blade is ignited and for the state in which the blade is not ignited. You can change the accent profiles on the fly in the accent menu. So far, the effect engine for NeoPixel. The effect engine for InHilt is very similar. Let's have a look at slot 3, for example. The different blade profiles correspond to different flicker and pulse effects. Now let's open the blade profile for a solid blade as an example. There's a single effect1.txt that contains the parameters for the flicker and pulse effects. In addition to that, there can be arbitrarily many color profiles. That means for any blade profile that corresponds to a certain effect, you can choose your favorite color on the fly. And of course, as for NeoPixel, everything is fully customizable. That means you can define or you can customize the flicker strength, the flicker speed, and the same holds also for the pulse effect. And of course, you can also, for example, combine flicker and pulse. So any option is possible here. As we finished discussing the effect fonts folder, let me just go back. Let's come to the sound fonts folder next. It contains all the sound fonts which are stored in folders called Sound 1, Sound 2 and so on. The firmware ignores any character after the digit so that you can add individual descriptions to each sound font. The board has its own naming scheme for sound files, but also supports the CFX naming scheme. There's also a common folder to which sound files can be added that should be used for all sound fonts, for example. By default, there are 4 music tracks that can be used for all sound fonts. Now let's come to the user interface sounds folder. As its name suggests, it contains all sound files that are used for the user interaction. There are sound files for the accent menu, the effect menu, the sound menu, the Saber editor, and many more. So far, these are all folders on the Golden Harvest v3. However, there's one important file too. It's called general.txt and contains all the parameters for the general settings. Here you can define the maximum volume, for example. It has a range between 0 and 400. And it's important to mention that by default it comes preset to a value of 100. You can also customize the accent menu, the effect menu and the sound menu, for example. Another important parameter is the effect font slot parameter. With this parameter, you can select which effect library you want to use. That way, you can easily try out different effect libraries without having to copy and paste any files.